going to present on From Serving Our Country to Serving Time, an in-depth look at how our justice system is failing our veterans.
Okay. As of June 2021, around 181,000 veterans in the United States were incarcerated in prison or jail. This is a shockingly high number. My desire to delve deeper into this subject arose during my time as an intern for the Douglas County Department of Corrections. While I was there, I became aware that they house veterans in a separate living unit, which took me by surprise. This spurred me to conduct research on this issue, and it has led me to want to understand why so many of our veterans end up behind bars, and if there are ways we can prevent it from happening. One of the main questions I had was what services are offered to all veterans, both the incarcerated ones and the ones who have just gotten out of the military. I discovered that there are many factors as to why veterans end up in correctional facilities, from mental health problems to substance abuse. Many of these issues could be prevented if we offered the correct service and help to every veteran. Weak support systems after getting out of the military, like having little to no family or peer support, can make transitioning back into the community rough. There's also a lack of transition programs for those who have no one to rely on. The big question is, do these existing programs even work? Do they do what they're intended to do, which is reducing the recidivism rates? Change needs to happen to reduce the recidivism rates because the people who fought for our country do not deserve a life in jail or prison. This can be achieved through legislation changes and creations of preventative programs so they are less likely to offend in the first place. According to the current data, former service members make up nearly 8% of those in state prisons and 5% of those 5% of the federal prison population. In 2016, the Bureau of Justice Statistics conducted a survey in both federal and state prisons on the veterans who were imprisoned there. 107,400 veterans were serving time in state or federal prison, with 98% of its population being male. As to which branch of the military these veterans were formerly a part of, this survey found that the majority of male veterans in state, 56%, and federal, 53%, prison served in the Army. A study done in 2012 found that a greater percentage of veterans, 64%, and non-veterans, 48%, were sentenced for violent offenses. This study also found that 43% of veterans and 55% of non-veterans in prison had 4 or more prior arrests. Male veterans in state prison, 26%, were twice as likely as male non-veterans in state prison, 12%, to be serving time for a violent sexual offense. It is shocking that they are twice as likely to be incarcerated for a violent sexual offense as compared to non-veteran inmates. It makes me think that there is a reason why the numbers are so high. There must be a correlation somewhere. The question is where and why. A study was done by the Southern Criminal Justice Association in 2018 and was aimed at trying to see if our veterans are more likely to get help with their mental health in prison versus when they are out in the community. They wanted to see if the stigma around getting help with mental health followed into the prison setting as well. They used a sample of 14,278 veteran and non-veteran inmates and found that veterans do not necessarily fare worse in prison and are actually more likely to obtain treatment. 2011-2012 was the last time a study involving veterans in jail was done. Recent studies focus on one or the other, which leads to misleading data when talking about all incarcerated veterans. And the data that does not represent the current veteran inmate population, as the data is over 11 years old, and it is time for a new in-depth study to be done to get an understanding of what the current population looks like and the statistics about why veterans are in jail or prison today, and if anything has changed in the past 11 years. All right, some history. In 1998, it was estimated about 56,500 veteran war era and 18,500 Persian Gulf War era veterans were held in state and federal prisons. That equals about 75,000 war era veterans in prison, not accounting for those held in jails. Today, there are about 110,000 veterans currently in prison, again, not accounting for those in jail. The number of veterans who are incarcerated has almost doubled since the year 1998, which is an issue that needs to be addressed and fixed. There have not been many specialized programs up until recently. In the 20th century, there were some programs, but very few of them. Nothing that has been standardized until recently. The first Veterans Drug Court was created in 2008 by a judge who noticed that the veterans involved in the criminal justice system were often struggling with substance abuse and mental health issues. Veterans Court was modeled after the Drug Court and has proven to be successful. Many countries across America implement the Veterans Court in their system today. The Veterans Association, or the VA, got its name after the president at the time, Herbert Hoover, consolidated the Veterans Bureau with the National Home for Disabled Volunteer Soldiers, and Pension Bureau redesigned it as the Veterans Administration. The VA offers many programs and services for veterans and their families. This includes medical benefits, housing programs, etc. The need for special programs arose from the wars in the early 20th century that resulted in a lot of injured soldiers with medical and personal needs. From there, special hospitals just for veterans and programs were developed and designed to aid veterans returning home from war. Mental illnesses. When someone thinks of a veteran who has been to war, what often first come to mind is PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Because of the traumatic things that they saw and experienced, PTSD can cause someone to have vivid flashbacks of traumatic events. These flashbacks can be so realistic to those affected that they believe they are reliving the event again. PTSD can affect anyone. It is commonly seen only in people who have been affected by violence and extreme trauma, like terrorist attacks, war, assault, natural disasters, shootings, and other heavily traumatizing events. Today, PTSD is more prevalent in veterans than ever since the 9/11 attacks, which caused the USA to send troops to Afghanistan and Iraq, and those who had returned from these places were more likely to suffer from PTSD. Symptoms of PTSD feature intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, and nightmares regarding the past trauma, causing avoidance of reminders, hypervigilance, and sleep difficulties. PTSD is correlated with substance abuse to help cope with their symptoms, which could lead to end up in jail or prison. A study done says that veterans who have PTSD are more likely to smoke tobacco. The number of veterans who smoke is almost double for those with PTSD, 60%, versus those without a PTSD diagnosis. According to ACLU, veterans who suffer from PTSD are up to 60% more likely to end up incarcerated than people who do not suffer from PTSD. Returning from deployment after having to partake in combat in another country dramatically increases the chances of developing PTSD. Depending on the branch, up to 31% of service members develop PTSD after returning from combat. Substance use disorders can be a huge factor as to why a veteran might end up behind bars. They use drugs to relieve the pain of their past or as a way to avert their negative feelings of depression and loneliness. The most common form of substance abuse among veterans is alcohol use, and it is often used for stress relieving and socializing. More than 1 in 10 U.S. veterans have been diagnosed with substance use disorder. In the year 2019 alone, 1.3 million veterans have been diagnosed with a substance abuse disorder, which makes up 6.2% of veterans. 63% of recent Afghanistan and Iraq veterans diagnosed with substance use disorders also met the criteria for PTSD. Suffering from depression is a common issue among many people, including military veterans. PubMed states that depression remains one of the most leading mental health conditions in the military. In many cases, depression causes sadness, loss of interest in activities people once enjoyed, withdrawal from others, and having little energy. Depression can also cause people to feel hopeless about the future and even think about suicide. The VA estimated that in 2008, about 1 in 3 veterans visiting their clinic had symptoms of depression. TBIs can result in a change in behavior and influence decision-making skills. While I was at the Douglas County Department of Corrections, I was informed that having a TBI dramatically increases the chance of substance abuse, which can lead to ending up in jail. Researchers estimate up to 60% of incarcerated individuals are living with traumatic brain injuries. According to the CDC, more than 450,000 U.S. service members were diagnosed with a TBI from 2000 to 2021. TBIs can affect one's ability to predict the consequences of his or her actions and can make it difficult to control emotions. Current research also suggests that veterans who are suffering from a TBI are more likely to have other health issues as well. For example, if one has a TBI, they are more likely to also have PTSD and depression. Did you know that each year, roughly 200,000 service members transition out of the military? Many soldiers get discharged from the military each year, and most of the transitions back into the society are very successful without issues. But sometimes, others struggle with drug and alcohol addiction, PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, and homelessness. Fortunately, there are many programs offered for individuals who have just left the military or are preparing to leave the military. Some of the services offered are also extended to their families. These services give them the tools needed to help their loved one. The Be There program, which is a peer assistance program, offers support to service members, their families, and transitioning veterans up to a year after separation or retirement. Through the program, they can talk privately with peer coaches who are veterans, service members, or military spouses. This program is incredibly helpful, especially for those who do not have anyone to help them back at home and give them the chance to talk to other people who have been in the situation they are currently facing. These peers give them helpful advice and tools needed to transition back successfully. The VA developed a program called the TIDES Project, and its goal was to help veterans with depression. The term TIDES stands for Translating Initiatives for Depression into Effective Solutions. This project ended up providing guidelines for collaboration between mental health and primary care specialists, with support for assessment and triage, patient education, and proactive follow-up of patients with symptoms of depression. This model now helps doctors and patients across the United States. The VA has also has services that include military sexual trauma counseling, grief counseling, readjustment counseling, employment counseling, and substance abuse assessment referrals. There are some downsides to these programs, though. Unfortunately, these services are not offered to all veterans. They have to apply to the VA to get qualified for these services and can be denied for many different reasons. Being denied hinders the recovery process and leaves them alone in society. They can end up being homeless and make them feel as if they cannot control their own life and may turn to illicit drugs, which can influence them to make bad choices to end up in jail or prison. Also, some people deny they need help or services. It is their choice to not do anything after getting out. There are more than 461 veteran treatment courts throughout the country. Veteran treatment courts are found in most states. Veterans Court operates similarly to the drug court. The goal of Veterans Court is to address and help veterans who are in trouble with the law, and it is designed to give veterans alternative to the criminal justice system when appropriate. Particularly when a veteran is suffering especially when veterans are suffering from PTSD or other mental health issues. When talking about the outcomes of veterans after completing Veterans Court, Veterans Treatment Court participants were more likely to have improved outcomes in mental health, social functioning, housing, and employment. While involved in Veterans Court, only 14% of veterans had new incarceration, compared to 23 to 46% of defendants in traditional court. After completing Veterans Court, some veterans were able to gain back their VA benefits. According to a 2018 survey, 12% more veterans qualified for VA disability or other benefits at the end of Veterans Treatment Court than at the beginning. HCRV, or Healthcare for Reentry Veterans, is a program from the VA that helps veterans who just got out of jail. Their main goal is to promote success and prevent homelessness among veterans returning home after incarceration. Their services include case management, referral to services like healthcare, employment and social services, and pre-release assessments before veterans get out of jail. Not in all jails and prisons offer special programs for veterans. It would be beneficial to have programs to help veterans standardize in all jails and prisons across the United States. They should receive the help that they need to start and lead a better life in the future for their friends and families. These treatments and programs should not be limited to which holding facility they're sent to determine if they can get the specialized treatment they need. All right, so missing info in the data. There is currently a longitudinal study being conducted over a 2-year span from the Council of Criminal Justice. They will conduct research and gather testimony to assess the extent and nature of veterans' involvement in the criminal justice system and risk factors that drive it, the adequacy of assistance for veterans as they re-enter civilian life, which strategies can prevent justice system involvement, and the effectiveness of the justice system response when veterans break the law. Once this study is published, this should give us a better idea as to the current statistics about the veterans who are currently in jail or prison, and if the programs we have available now work the way they are intended to. There have not been many studies done recently beside the one that is currently ongoing. A lot of the studies we have available to us are very outdated, and some are even 10 years or older, and a lot has changed since then. A lot of the studies focus on either jail or prison, and rarely look at the big picture and focus on both. It would also be beneficial to know the recidivism rates among veterans who complete programs versus those who do not complete programs to give us an idea if the current programs are fulfilling their purpose and helping rehabilitate veterans, or if different approaches need to be taken to reduce the rates. The studies do mention that many veterans have been arrested multiple times, but have they been put through a special program? Are there even programs offered where they are incarcerated? There could be a lack of programs that lead to reoffending. Because of how outdated the data is, it does not accurately represent the veteran inmate population today. In August of 2021, Minnesota became the first state to allow veterans with service-related trauma to avoid serving time for certain crimes, while ensuring a conviction does not strain their record. They are calling it the Veterans Restorative Justice Act, and is only to be used in non-violent cases like theft and DUI, while at the same time treating the issues that led to crimes like PTSD and unresolved mental illnesses. This act is not a get-out-of-jail-free card, and the measure does not show leniency towards serious violent crimes such as murder and manslaughter. This could be a good alternative to veterans court, as people would have different options. Currently, there is very limited data about the current legislation to help veterans who have been incarcerated. More legislation acts would be important to put into place for veterans involved in the justice system, because it could give them a chance at a better life and to turn their life around. I could only find one actual legislation act on ways to treat a veteran who was convicted of a crime. New legislation could easily help veterans because it would put laws into place to help them. If we had legislation acts that would make it so every veteran could be offered treatment while in jail or prison, I believe it would dramatically reduce the recidivism rates among the veteran population. Right now, Veterans Court and special treatment programs are not available in all countries and cities across the United States. And if we had more data that could justify making new legislation acts, so every veteran is offered Veterans Court or the ability to go through programs. My proposed legislation changes. I believe it would be beneficial to all our veterans if we took a more preventative approach to this issue, along with what the current legislation has in place. Right now, legislation is focused on those who have already committed the crimes and are helping rehabilitate them and try to give them less of a punishment. I believe in addition to new legislation, there should be something in place to help prevent someone from committing the crime in the first place. More programs should be developed to aid our veterans to help steer them in the right path and re-enter society successfully. My proposed legislation change is to make Veterans Court available to all incarcerated veterans across the United States. Not all counties offer Veterans Court. All counties and cities offer Veterans Court, which I think should be a mandatory thing to offer. Veterans Court has proven to be successful, and whether someone has access to it should not be determined by the county they're in, or if they're lucky enough to be in a county that has it. It should be something that every incarcerated individual has offered to them. VA eligibility for benefits should also be loosened, so individuals involved in the justice system are still able to receive help and benefits from the VA. As of right now, if a veteran who has a VA benefits gets in trouble with the law, they are at risk of losing those benefits and may end up losing them and not getting them back, which makes their life much harder. Some different approaches we could take to bring down the numbers of current incarceration rates among veterans, in my opinion, would not only use a reactive approach to treatment and rehabilitation, like what is currently being offered, but also a preventative approach to this situation like I talked about in the previous slide. If we can develop a program for newly discharged military personnel to go through to help prevent them from going down the wrong path in the near future, I believe it would be most beneficial and we would get to see the impact of such a program and the new incarceration rates among veterans after the fact of the program being established. This program could involve someone to keep in touch with the newly retired person and help them keep on track and set them up with the proper resources they may need from therapy, housing assistance, finding a job within the community, and reliable means of transportation. It is also noted there should be more of an expansion on the current reactive approaches we currently implement. Programs in special courts like Veterans Court is not offered for all veterans and not even available everywhere, which is not helping the number of recidivism rates. I believe if Veterans Court and special programs were to be implemented in every county and state jail and prison, it would dramatically help the recidivism rates drop and see less reoffending among the military veteran community. I think a preventative approach would work along with the current reactive approaches we have now, even better than just the reactive approaches we have now, like Veterans Court and special treatment programs. Because if we can work to prevent a veteran towards criminality in the first place, then they would be less likely to end up in the criminal justice system. This would also have a domino effect because if we start to see less veterans in the criminal justice system, then the recidivism rates would go down because the veterans who are in the system currently might be going through a program to prevent them from reoffending, and we would also see less newcomers, so we can start to focus on those who have been reoffending for a long time. Veterans behind bars do receive treatment, but it is not available for every veteran in the correctional institution, due to location and size. During my research, I discovered that veterans do not get the help needed and support that we could be offering them, like for their different mental illnesses. Untreated mental illnesses have a huge role in criminality, in which they can lead one to engaging in criminal acts, which can result in incarceration. After the study that is currently being conducted by the Council of Criminal Justice is published, we should have a much better idea of what the current statistics are among veterans in prison and jail in the United States. Until then, we can only use what data we have currently to propose changes that help prevent our veterans from ending up in the criminal justice system in the first place. The changes that I propose to happen are to make Veterans Court available in all counties and cities across the United States, loosen the VA benefits and rules so veterans in the system can still access help through the VA, and have newly retired veterans have access to people or special programs to help them successfully re-enter society and get back on their feet, which includes stable housing, job, and transportation. Does anyone have any questions? No? All right, and then I just have